Hello and welcome to the Honest Not Perfect podcast. My name is Suzanne Ellingham and I'm the director of Source Events, the platform that helps connect retailers, brands and wholesalers to manufacturers and makers globally.
And my name is Jack Stratton. I'm director of Insider Trends. We are a global retail trend spotting agency helping brands to spot what's coming next.
So welcome to Honest Not Perfect. It's where myself and Jack talk to people within our sector about their journey into retail, sustainability, manufacturing, global trade, anything else that comes to mind. Today we have a slightly new perspective. So we're joined by Hayley Shaw, who's Senior Design Manager for Pepsi. And it's fair to say Hayley's had an interesting journey into our sourcing world. And what we're curious about is kind of how her role as a designer has evolved, how she ended up there. I know she's very passionate about sustainability and circularity. I always think the time that we spend talking together is quite humbling. I think sometimes you underestimate how much you bring to that conversation with the perspective that you have. So, Hayley, welcome.
Thanks so much.
I've probably started at 10. How did you end up where you are now? Where did it start?
Gosh.
You come from a design side.
Yes, it's been quite the journey, as you said. So it all started out in New York City. I went to FIT, fashion school, but not for fashion. Wow. So I was in the very small niche program of packaging design. So I really started my design journey very specific in the granular of building out cartons and shrink wraps and cans, bottles,
the glamorous stuff.
So glamorous. And from there, I started out working in the agency world in New York City. Again, very packaging orientated. All about the boxing, the kind of functionality of how things operated and opened and closed, the visuals for each brand. But slowly, I think over my career, it kind of unfolded from the pack and a very pack-oriented kind of focus to being so much more about everything else. And I think brands have evolved in that way over the past 15 years or so in such a big way, where I think most brands now, I think, are aspiring to be quote-unquote lifestyle brands. So it's no longer just about the product. I think it's about everything else, almost everything but. And I would say that currently I am still working for a CPG company. Yeah. However, I think we hardly touch the packaging. Yeah. You know, it's really about the customer experiences, the way we come to life in so many other ways, how you interact with the brand on social media or in spaces or other tangible things that might be a part of your life. And I think that that's the biggest kind of evolution that my career has had over the past 12 years or so. Aside from also moving abroad and building the teams, building the offices, and then also kind of pushing the agenda of how these brands show up. I think with kind of the uncomfortable task of moving somewhere else and then also meeting new people or kind of building new teams, you kind of just face a lot of questionable things, or you start to question everything. And I think that's why I've kind of pivoted so many different times and evolved into quite a different space from where I started out.
It's interesting you said around questioning different things.
Yep.
And I also find I found lots of things interesting. That was so many places to go. I'm going to start with, it sounds like it's moved, and I wonder what your view on this, from, say, starting out on packaging where it was probably more about cost and functionality to really that journey into actually the brand message as a whole. Yeah. It's like, how do you move from that thing to actually looking at that brand activation? What do you think has really driven that? Do you think it was consumers? Do you think it's technology? Do you think it's how we connect?
I mean, all of the above. I think there's a lot to unpack within that, really. But I think people are no longer looking at brands to just do one thing. I think obviously the market just continues to grow. And so brands are constantly pushing themselves. And I think that brands that aren't pushing themselves get a lot less visibility. And people do want to connect on a deeper level. Like, they want to relate to whatever they're purchasing in a deeper way, I think, than they used to. Not every time. But I think generally, especially for bigger brands, they're almost expected to have a standpoint of some sort and a story to tell, I'd say. I think that that's always sort of the starting point of any brief, any project ever in creative is like, what's the story that we're going to tell here, and how do you start to form that?
Yeah.
Another one I like to do is like, if this brand were a person walking into a party, who are they? What are they wearing? Who are they with? What music do they put on? Like, what's their outfit? What's their vibe? Did they stay all night or did they go home? You know, like start to dress.
Who are the people who order shots at 2 a.m.? There's a brand.
That's a great. I don't know.
We can't say who that brand is.
Yeah,
No,
exactly. Yeah, so I think that's really where brands are continually going to push. And even beyond just like, we always call it beyond the bottle. But I think for any brand, like, I think we're just starting to have so many more purposes. You see like Dior fruit stands or, you know, big fashion brands doing things that you just never would expect. But now it's quite familiar and expected or almost like people are kind of waiting to see that, I think.
I know you probably can talk about this more because we'll have our favourites, but I love what Anya Hindmarsh do every summer.
Yeah,
you
totally.
get a really cool shop pop up, and
Exactly.
it just makes you really interact with that brand in a different way.
And it's been the Anya Hindmarch Village. I was thinking about it the other day. It's been a couple of years, and that they have a pop up there, and still every couple of months that will change to something completely unexpected. It will go back to the. Have you ever seen the ice creams?
Yeah.
Well done. That is incredible, but it's remarkable. And to your point, Hayley, how much as a brand they'll commit to that idea of just showing up and actually showing up sometimes will be so far away from what you might have thought that she sells bags, but it equally, it really doesn't matter because the one thing that's always there is it's interesting. You go and you're like, wow, this is cool.
Yeah, 100%.
A quick question on, so just briefly thinking about, with your experience, ethics and sustainability, but very broadly, at a very kind of high level. How do you think also that has evolved in terms of the storytelling bit? Because I think when some brands are doing it when they show up in different places and are going, right, this is an opportunity to tell a story about what we do well. But it's interesting to me also how many brands don't use that opportunity. Like you say Dior fruit stand or whoever it is. It's like often I go, God, that's amazing. They've taken people to this different place.
Yeah.
And they could then be telling a really meaningful, helpful story, and how often they don't. I think there's so many good opportunities to do that, but I want to put that to you.
I think that comes back to the boardroom. I think that's stakeholder alignments that aren't had or almost that fear of just saying the wrong thing. I do think that brands often get held back by that. Almost too many cooks in the kitchen, classic problem to have. The bigger the brand, the more people.
Cooks in the kitchen.
The more cooks in the kitchen, absolutely. And then the message won't get out there. And you almost just get this kind of fuzzy, almost message going on.
Yeah.
You feel like it's like a half-baked story. That's a common problem to have. And I think that links back as well to the sustainability thing. I think risk aversity is probably the biggest thing holding brands back most of the time. Brands, big companies, anyone in the world. I think you really have to have leadership that's willing to take that leap, because if the leaders aren't there, no matter how much you push from the bottom, you're always going to have those barriers. And I think you could still get some things through the cracks, but then other things just get completely held back. And I've watched that time after time, and that is the toughest part, is just that risk aversity. But also, I mean, I think that links into the whole greenwashing thing that people bang on about all the time, because it's such a thing. I think you framed it a different way.
I think there's greenwashing and green bashing. And I think sometimes they're both sides of the same coin, which is people won't talk about something in case they're not 100% right, and it goes, it's reputational risk. They get it wrong, it goes viral. Oh my God, it's not worth the attention. But also that stops people talking about progress, because again, it's this hyper focus on all of the things that you don't do, then actually just share the things that we do.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I think it's that risk of reputation. It's like sometimes you just think, just please just share what you're doing, because some people will be on that journey too. And even if it's not 100% perfect, like the fact that you're willing to say that is important.
Totally. I think I've been seeing more of that. I think some brands have taken it quite far. Like there's this random shower wash that I've turned over in a friend's shower because they just had about 5 different claims on the front of the bottle, which is also quite shocking. But it was like calling out how many mint leaves. I think it was like 16,000 mint leaves in each bottle. I was like, that's a lot of mint.
There's a lot of mint.
But then they also called out how much plastic they were using, and they had a percentage that was recycled plastic. But I liked that they didn't say it's 100% recycled plastic, because
Yes.
it wasn't. But they
Yeah.
were claiming that they were almost there. And I was like, that's a great example of a brand that was like, you know what? We're going to put it on there, and it's 83%. It's not 100. But like, good for them, you know?
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
that's the step that exactly what you're saying. It's like, even if it's not perfect, like shout about it, because it's like, oh crap, well now they've done it. Now we need to talk about something.
Yeah.
And
You know
instead
what?
of waiting for that perfect, it's like it's better done than perfect.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I
Awesome.
really liked all of what you said about like the clarity that it does come from board senior people being risk averse, because any brand I'll ever speak to or meet, the design teams, anyone working on anything in relation to trying to do things in a more progressive, ethical way, like they are almost always great. And then when the thing that they produce is sometimes a bit wishy-washy, like it's like they're partly trying to be fun and creative, but they also want to do a bit of sustainability. But you're right. Partly you can interpret that as, oh, well, they haven't designed a particularly good thing. But in reality, what's going on is they probably the first iteration of it was
great.
absolutely great. and then the fear comes in. And I think it's really important that people always remember that it's not that these, as individuals, are not great. It's that, you know, the board, and often the board are good people as well, but they're just terrified because they go, that we see problems with this. That's the problem that is at the moment is impossible to prevent. But
And often it's even more annoying where it's like, we really like that, but I'm not so sure. And it's like, but why?
yeah, they won't exactly explain.
Like,
they won't even explain exactly
I do
what
like
it is.
it, but
Yeah.
I say this to my husband all the time. It's like when he says, "Oh, I really like that," but it's like, right, anything you've said before the word "but," I'm going to ignore.
Yeah.
I use a slightly different phrase, like
Exactly.
Yeah,
only
yeah.
really listen to what comes after the "but," because
Yeah.
that's the feedback you need.
exactly.
But it's true, and they say, "Oh, I love this," but it's like, "Oh God, here we go." It's like if you could just say it without the "but," it'd be great. But often it is. It's
Yep.
like it's that overthinking. And you do need to do that. I think we live in a world that is very connected, and I think people are very conscious of going and being seen to be doing the wrong things. But sometimes you need to be seen to be doing something.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's why sometimes I talk about this a lot, really small, fast growth kind of D2C brands or whatever, who have tiny teams, often do really clear, brilliant things because they haven't got those layers of
100%.
And sometimes there are problems and risks, but the risks are so much smaller because for them it's all growth. There's less fear.
Definitely. And I think that also links into the bigger the company, the longer it's going to take to move. And that kind of leads me to another thought that I've had a lot recently, which is kind of letting go of the short-term wins and really reminding people of the long-term goals.
Yeah.
Because the bigger the brand, the longer it's going to take. So instead of thinking about next year, which we're always thinking about the year ahead, we need to think about 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, it takes about 10 years to get true change to happen.
Yeah.
So we can't be just looking at what the trend is for next year. It's really what's going to actually happen in 10 years' time. What's that landscape going to look like? And then how do we get there kind of now? Because
I think I'm super curious about this, and we're doing some work with a large industry partner who's got a 2030 plan that we'll be announcing probably about the same time this podcast goes live. And we have this conversation all the time. It's like people know we need to change, but people are so entrenched, and brands and businesses and retailers, it's a tough business environment at the moment. And when they're just looking at the next 6 months, not even next year, how do you get them to think about 5 years, 10 years? What do we think stops that? Do we think it's because a board has a short tenure, so they don't want to rock that boat? They just need to be seen to be delivering shareholder returns in whatever time period that they have? Is it they just don't want to rock the boat? Is it just they think, oh, it's somebody else's problem? And I think, and I'm always curious, it's like I said, I was having a conversation with somebody a few days ago. I said, do you think it's volatility that's just stopping progress? Like the world is just too crazy and people are looking at short-term
Gotta
pain
get through this
all
day.
of the time. It's like, I don't care about 10 years ago. I need to talk about tomorrow.
Yes.
But those tomorrows are starting to stack up.
Yes, absolutely.
How would that more long-term view feed into how you would approach design? What kind of things are you thinking about at a high level if you're thinking more long-term?
For me, it would lead to more risk-taking.
What's risk-taking in from a design side? Is it materials? Is it process?
Yeah.
Is it where do you think is the win?
I think it's kind of all parts of the process from start to finish of a project. It's just being able to take a step back and go, well, hang on, what actually are we being asked to do here? And I think it's being able, before you even start the project, to kind of take a brief and go, is this the brief that we need to be delivering to? And almost picking apart a brief and going, is there a better way to look at this? Like, what's the overall objective that we're really trying to get at? And if you really know what needs to drive that objective, then I think you can almost rethink even how to approach it from the start. So it kind of starts from there. And then everything along the way. I mean, even just developing new relationships with new suppliers or vendors, or often in design, you're bringing on different people to get different tasks done. Even just bringing on new partners to work with that do things slightly differently, or using new tech. Like sometimes even just those small decisions can make a huge shift in the way creative will come out. But sometimes even those decisions are hard to make because people are like, oh, well, bringing in a new vendor means onboarding a new,
We're going to get rid of.
Yes, and even that takes a lot of push. So I think it's every step along the way. It's just like not being afraid to make a different decision than you did last time. I think often in creative, you can almost burn out because you start to see every project runs the exact same. You get a brief, you start with your mood boarding and concepting, you go into developing 3 ideas, you pick one, you go down, you execute it, and often you're doing that with the same people, the same, types of partners, the same materials, vendors, etc., same sourcing, whatever it is, and then it just feels like repeat.
Yeah.
And I think we often get stuck in that. I mean, I've had years of my career where I felt like, hang on a second, what am I actually doing here? Like, let me pull my head up and out of the water for a second and, think, like, why am I feeling bored? Why am I feeling like I'm not pushing things forward? And I'm like, I'm kind of doing everything the exact same that I was this time last year, And I think it's that, again, moving abroad made me really think differently. And I think that constant trying to shift the way you're seeing things helps things push forward as well. But
yeah, and all of this has made me think about like how the sweet spot, and it's an incredibly hard thing, but I'm interested in your take on it, where you can kind of design something or come up with something where it has obvious company commercial benefit. It's a big company, that's always part of it. But also at the same time, you are kind of addressing some bigger thing, some longer term thing. And it happened recently and it's only a small thing, but M&S have started, and it's not necessarily ethics, but more like kind of personal health, and you probably both have seen it, but they've started putting on the front of really common products like uses only 3 ingredients, 4 ingredients, whatever, right?
Yeah. So
it'd be like bread with 3 ingredients.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, for me, is that they will sell a lot of bread doing that. It's totally commercial. Because actually from a customer point of view, it's great because it's like simple, nice looking bread. But they are actually addressing a more fundamental problem, which is we've got to change. So for them, it's like we need to get customers out of the idea that bread lasts 3 weeks because that isn't natural, right? It's weird for bread to have whatever preservatives in, too many chemicals. We need to get back to blah, blah, all that kind of clean eating stuff. But what they did, and I realised, is they've made something that makes them money, but actually is a long-term design thing. They're trying to get customers to used to a world again where food is simple and does go off quite quickly. And I saw it and I was like, wow. So what do you – is that – it's maybe the impossible thing with the designer, how you get that win-win. You're addressing a big problem, but commercial. But have you had those moments sometimes?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think those moments happen when you've got an insight that all of a sudden just clicks and you kind of go, hang on, we've seen that consumers have had this issue and we really need to solve that. And I think it usually, it from the second you see an insight. It could be something like people break their nails trying to open soda cans. So actually, is there a way to kind of fix that through something innovative, like a ring that pops open your can for you? Random things like that. But often you'll see an insight and then some idea might click. And I think the best sort of design kind of solutions come from a really strong insight or problem to solve. And then kind of going from there. Because some projects, it's like when you don't have that very pointed sort of brief, that's when it's a bit wishy-washy, like half-baked. It's not really doing much of anything at all. And that's why I say it's so important to unpick a brief at the start and go, what are we actually trying to do here?
Yeah.
You know? And often we don't ask that question, and then that's where you get, again, middle of the road kind of stuff.
I think that kind of applies to all product development, though. I mean, you're coming at that from a creative side. I wonder how many businesses ever sit back and put their head above water, like you said, and just go, you know what? What are we doing this for?
Yes. Yeah.
Is this the best thing to do? Should we be doing it? Is there a better use of our time? And often I feel it comes back to, we've always done it this way. Like, this is the way we did it. It's safe. And I think it comes down to that ability to just take a bit of a risk.
Absolutely.
But I think my sense is that consumers will forgive a risk. Like, if they see brands trying something that is a little bit different or a bit more creative, people are more likely maybe to give it a go.
Yep.
I think the consumer landscape is shifting massively. And that's another thing. That's part of my little rant about thinking long term is just how much I think younger generations are shifting the way that they consume and what they expect from brands. I mean, people talk about this all the time, but like, I do just think Gen Z operates so differently from your boomers, and they're shopping with a different purpose, and they are expecting to see content that is kind of more relatable or authentic, and they are expecting transparency. They are expecting better, you know? And I think that constant reminder needs to happen more. But often you don't have those Gen Z thinkers in the room who are actually working on these things. So that's the gap as well. Yeah.
It made me think of, and I always like to give them a shout out because they're so good at this, Lush, who I think because Lush get things wrong. That's not talked about a lot. There will be things they do where someone, someone in Gen Z or otherwise who spot that thing that is a bit off, or a claim that isn't quite right. But what is great is the fact is that Lush will be doing so much, and that the intention is so good that I don't think it diminishes trust. If anything, it helps, because they're just like, well, yeah, okay, we got that thing wrong, but actually, if you look more broadly at what we're doing, we are trying to push all of this forwards, and there will be mistakes along the way. And I like that culture that they have.
I think it's the accountability piece.
Yeah.
We talk about this quite a lot. And I think it's the accountability of, say, somebody's saying it's only 83% recycled. It's like, okay, great. I bet you next year it'll be 84, or it might still be 83, but they'll be talking about what they're doing to do it. And I think with Lush, they'll come out and they'll acknowledge they got something wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that actually, if anything, builds that trust and authenticity. And it builds those customer connections, because nobody's perfect. No brand is perfect. And sometimes it's about, when people set goals, they're great if they hit them, but if they don't, just tell us you're trying.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it's a different dialogue to have with your community, with your customers. And I think that's where the win really is. And I feel like that's a shift in consumer behaviour, that now we kind of will just acknowledge and forgive that, but just be honest about it. I think it's that authenticity in really relationships they have with their key customers and people around them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Accountability as a word, does that kind of, do you feel similarly that's a big part of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of, again, bigger the brand, the bigger the expectations, or we think. And it's this thought that you have to be perfect and shiny and no flaws. And that's actually not what people want anymore, I don't think.
No.
What is it that excites you for the future? Because you've got such a broad, quite a cool role, and such an interesting breadth of experience and views. And like you say, consumers are changing. What really excites you for the area that we kind of live in right now? What's the thing that you think, you know what, in 5 years, that's going to be super cool?
I don't know about 5 years, but
10.
There was something that I was thinking about, and it was about this idea of like, if you were kind of traditionally a brand that sells a product, but the future ultimately needs to be selling less. We all need to do less. I think do less has been my motto for the past 2 years.
Yeah.
And I think that that's not just in the way I behave, but I think the whole world kind of needs to behave is like consume less. Like we talk about sustainability or forward thinking, but actually making more stuff is never going to be the answer. And so one thing that I've been thinking about is like actually real sustainability looks like a lot less.
Yeah.
And so in order to kind of take a product-focused brand and shift that into maybe a service or an experiential type of brand, I think that that's an exciting space that is probably going to need to happen at some point. And I think to the point at the beginning of this conversation about brands doing different things that you wouldn't expect, you know, a fashion brand having snacks or ice creams or coffees or whatever. I think more and more, I think brands are branching out. And I think that that will be a shift that will happen. Probably not in 5 years, but 10, 15?
No, but I love that. We call it post-growth, degrowth, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
It's like we talk. You love Uniqlo for this. They're
Yes.
one of the few brands that's been able to increase their profits without, at the same time, increasing the amount of stuff that they produce.
Totally.
Sure.
And I feel that's super exciting. And that's where there's going to be a lot of innovation, a lot of change. But also,
Absolutely.
I think the consumers are going to come on that journey.
Yeah.
They've got to. I think everybody knows there is too much stuff, there's too much waste. And I feel there's moments in time where you have those points of innovation where something just shifts. And I think that is coming. Who knows when it's going to be, but I think it's going to be sooner rather than later.
I agree. I think that's the most exciting thing because I also think it's exciting because I have no idea what that looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah, exactly. We've all got to figure it out. That's why it's
Exactly.
exciting.
And I love that it excites you, and it excites me. It probably excites you. It would terrify other people.
totally.
It's good.
Good.
Oh,
Let
Hayley.
them be scared.
Oh,
Yeah, totally.
well, change is coming. Some people are fine with that, but it's definitely like something just has to give and change. And I think it's exciting to see how these things kind of evolve. Hayley, it's been amazing having you in. I think for me, what I loved and what I'm going to take away, because I always think there's one thing in every conversation that I love, and it's when you said, like, how often do we stick our heads up and it's like we've been doing the same thing and question ourselves. I think we're very good at questioning business and systems around us and say, oh, it's their fault. But actually, how often do we sit up and go, you know what am I doing? It's like, what could I be doing differently? And then really just have that reflection. And I wonder how many people are in that space where they are just very much stuck in the mud or just stuck in the process and just like maybe a bit bored or creatively a bit stifled. And it takes a bit of bravery to have that self-reflection.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for me, a huge takeaway for this because it goes across so many areas.
Yes. And my takeaway is definitely, because it's happened a couple of times on these podcasts, like with Safia Mini, the elephant in the room being addressed, post-growth, degrowth, less stuff. I really like it when people who have worked with big companies and, you know, have the confidence to address that because, you know, the truth is, and to your point, it's basically the future is not just making less, but how do we make that commercial? That's everything.
Yeah.
So like you say, maybe it's products to services. I love that. Maybe it's more profit, charging customers more and making them more used to spending more.
Maybe
whatever
it's
it is.
finding a way to monetize the repair and recycle.
Totally.
Yeah.
In fact, Stuart Trevory was on the podcast a little while ago.
Yeah.
I was talking to him last week around the repair element. It's
Yeah.
like there's got to be a way to scale that up.
Totally.
Because brands are either doing it to tick boxes or there's something there. But it then just comes to who's looking at what's
Exactly.
possible.
Or I just think every single conversation should hang off of that one central conversation is, yes, but how do we make less stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then,
Do
you know,
less.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to do less.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Oh, Hayley, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you guys. This
Thanks,
has been
Hayley.
great.
Good. Thank you very much.